The day I started working at TechVision was a mix of anxiety and expectation. Upon entering the imposing glass building, with the company logo shining on the facade, my feet felt heavy. Every step toward the elevator made me feel like I was walking up to court rather than a new job. The receptionist smiled, but the image of a welcoming place soon shattered when I crossed paths with Victor, my manager. Victor was the kind of guy who looked like he came out of a movie about arrogant executives. He had this look that could go through you like a knife, and he didn't hesitate to use it. As soon as I introduced myself, he raised an eyebrow, as if I was playing a bad joke. "You're the intern, right? I hope you're ready for real work," he said, his voice thick with disdain. I felt heat rise to my face, and a lump formed in my throat. During the morning, as I tried to familiarize myself with the company's system, every little error seemed amplified. "Daniel, this is unacceptable. You really need to pay more attention," Victor snapped upon seeing a small error in a report I had prepared. The humiliation made me want to shrink into my chair. The room was full of stares, and I could have sworn some classmates were trying to hide smiles. I just mumbled, "Sorry," and went back to work, trying to ignore the despondency that enveloped me. During the break, I decided to leave my desk for a bit and, perhaps, find some comfort. I met Lisa, a friendly colleague who worked in the marketing department. She had a coffee in her hand and a smile on her face. "Hi, Daniel. How's your first day going?" he asked, with an encouraging tone. A typical day in a big office, lots of work and a difficult boss," I replied, trying not to let on how bad I was. Lisa tilted her head, understanding. "Victor is a pain in the ass. But don't give up. You're talented, and everyone here knows it. Just stay focused on your goals." His words were like a bomb, but insecurity still gnawed at me inside. The rest of the day was a repeat of the beginning. During the afternoon meeting, Victor cut me off while trying to present an idea that I believed to be valuable. "This is a waste of time, Daniel. Do you really think anyone here cares about this nonsense? Focus on what really matters," he said, and the muffled laughter of some colleagues echoed in the room. The feeling of helplessness took over me and, at the end of the meeting, I could barely face the people around me. When the day finally came to an end, and most of my colleagues began to disperse, I found myself alone in the bathroom. The echo of my footsteps sounded empty. I looked in the mirror and saw a stranger. The person looking back at me was not the person I had dreamed of being. "Why can't I be stronger?" I thought, as a tear slid down my cheek. I wanted to scream, I wanted everything to be different, that I could find a way to be respected. That feeling of helplessness consumed me, and the idea that Victor was determined to make me feel smaller than I was felt like a crushing shadow. I left the bathroom, breathing deeply, trying to regain some of my dignity. Amidst the chaos of my mind, one phrase echoed, "Don't give up, Daniel." If Lisa could believe me, maybe I could find a way to believe it too. The path ahead of me was still hazy, but I knew something inside me was beginning to stir. The day started like any other. The sun was still rising over the city that never sleeps, but I was already awake, my heart beating fast, anticipating another day under Victor's supervision. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air as I prepared for work, trying to convince myself that today would be different, that maybe I could avoid yet another humiliation. However, hopes were soon dashed as soon as I stepped into the company. As soon as I entered, the atmosphere was already charged. Victor was at his desk, staring at the screen as if he was waiting for something, or someone, to attack. The first task of the day was an update to the software he supervised. With a knot in my stomach, I went to him. "Good morning, Victor. I'm ready to work on updating the system," he said, trying to sound confident. He looked up at me, and the contempt in his gaze was palpable. "You? Ready? This is a joke, Daniel. You can barely finish your basic tasks. Why would I let you play on this project?" He smiled sarcastically, as if amused by my insecurity. "I promise I can help. I did some research tonight and, researches? What kind of research could you do that didn't involve the word coffee? Go back to your corner and clean up the mistakes you made yesterday. And don't forget to let me know when you're done, so I can review and correct your mistakes," he cut in, turning his attention back to the screen. The day passed in an endless sequence of repetitive tasks. I felt like a robot, doing the work that Victor despised. Criticism came from all sides, but mainly from him. Every mistake he made was an invitation to yet another humiliation. It was as if he fed off my frustration. "Is this what you call programming, Daniel? A monkey could do better," he bellowed in a meeting, laughing at his own joke. It was during a call with a client that everything changed, even if for a brief moment. The client, a man with a warm voice, praised a project I had worked on. "Daniel, your work was truly impressive. I was surprised at how easily I found the solution I needed. Congratulations," he said, and I felt heat rise through my body. It was as if, for a moment, the world had lit up. "Thank you, sir. I'm glad you liked it," I replied, trying to hide my emotion, but I couldn't. It was a rare moment of validation. Unfortunately, the joy was short-lived. When I ended the call and turned to share the good news with Victor, he was watching everything with a cynical smile. "What was that, Daniel? A compliment from a client? Don't get excited. They're probably just trying to be polite. You didn't do anything special," he snapped, without giving me space to respond. Those words cut deeper than I care to admit. The joy he had felt evaporated like smoke in the wind. What could have been a boost of confidence immediately turned into a reminder of my insignificance. My shoulders slumped, and frustration began to build up inside me again. What could I do to change the situation? I felt like I was trapped in a trap with no way out. That day, I left the office with my head down, my thoughts racing. I looked out the bus window on the way home, watching the city pass by, each light shining like a distant hope. I wanted to be one of those points of light, but the reality was that I was just an insignificant intern, stifled by a manager who seemed to have fun at my expense. Arriving home, I sat in my small apartment, surrounded by books and notes that had previously seemed promising. I looked at my computer, wishing it could give me an answer on how to change my situation. What did I need to do to be recognized? What more could I bear? With each passing day, the idea of revenge began to germinate in my mind, but I still didn't know how I could put it into practice. The routine at the company began to consume me in a way I never imagined possible. The days dragged on, and Victor's presence made every moment unbearable. I, who previously dreamed of waking up every day excited to face new challenges, now counted the hours until the workday ended. The atmosphere in the team seemed dense, and I felt like an intruder, a dead weight that was just taking up space. Once, in a meeting, Victor turned to me, with that cynical smile that had become familiar. "Daniel, are you still here? I thought you had already found a new hobby, like collecting programming errors." His laugh echoed in the room, and I felt my face burn. My colleagues' gazes shifted, some tried to hide smiles, while others looked genuinely embarrassed. "Yes, Victor, I'm just dedicating myself to learning from the best," I replied, trying to maintain my composure. But the truth was that, every day, his arrogance became more unbearable. As the pressure increased, I began to pull away. Coffee hour conversations became a constant reminder of my insignificance. Lisa still tried to encourage me, but it was difficult to accept words of comfort when reality surrounded me like a hungry wolf. "Daniel, you can't let him control your life. You have so much to offer," she said in a soft tone as she stirred her coffee. "It's easy to say, Lisa. You don't know what it's like to be under Victor's sights every day," I replied, my voice thick with frustration. She just nodded, as if she understood my suffering, but I knew that understanding didn't pay the bills. One night, when I returned home, the weight of my thoughts was almost unbearable. The bus rocked and the city glowed outside, but I was lost in my own darkness. When I opened my cell phone, I found a message from Lucas, a friend from college. "Hey, Daniel. Remember what we always say, challenges are for the strong. Don't give up on your dreams. You are capable of much more than you know." Those words touched something deep inside me. A flame of determination began to ignite, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a little lighter. "I can do this," I muttered to myself as I walked home. The idea of becoming a helpless victim was no longer acceptable. I needed a plan. What Victor didn't know was that he also had weaknesses. An involuntary smile appeared on my face. If he thinks he can step on me, maybe I should teach him a lesson about respect. Over the next few days, I began to observe Victor more closely. He was methodical, but he had his weaknesses. I knew he spent a lot of time bragging about his achievements, but there were also times when he was vulnerable. A conversation I had with one of the older developers made me realize that Victor had a history of questionable decisions. "He's good at showing off, but he's made choices that almost cost the company an important project," said the colleague, while looking at the computer. This information kept bouncing around in my head. I could use that to my advantage. Not to destroy his life, but to show that I was not someone to be underestimated. "He needs to know that I have my worth too," I whispered to myself, with a new focus in mind. The idea of revenge wasn't just about retribution, it was about regaining my self-esteem, about proving not only to him, but to myself, that I was capable of more. The hours at work started to be different. I was no longer just counting the minutes, but analyzing Victor's every move. Like a chess player, I was making my move, and with each passing day, confidence was slowly returning. It was time to end the humiliation and claim what was rightfully mine, respect. The tension in the meeting room was palpable. All eyes turned to me, and expectation mixed with fear. I knew this was my chance to stand out, to show that, despite being just an intern, I had something valuable to offer. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility on my shoulders. The presentation I prepared over the last few weeks was the result of my effort and dedication, and I was determined not to let Victor belittle it. "Good morning everyone," I began, my voice a little shaky. "Today, I will present a new project that I believe can revolutionize the way we deal with our customers." As I spoke, I noticed Victor in his chair, with his arms crossed and a disdainful expression. He was ready to take me down, of course. The presentation flowed. I showed graphs, statistics and examples of how implementing my idea could increase the team's efficiency. I saw some faces light up, and that gave me courage. In short, he concludes, this project would not only improve our relationship with customers, but could also increase revenue by around 20% in the next quarter. A silence hung in the air. Then, like thunder, Victor stood up. "That's all very nice, Daniel," he said, with a cynical smile. "But you must remember that you are just an intern. Do you really think your ideas are enough to change our strategy?" He cast a contemptuous glance at the team, as if daring everyone to agree with him. I felt my heart sink. Those cutting words hit me like a sharp blade. There was a mix of anger and humiliation inside me, but in those moments, something inside me began to transform. I wasn't just an intern, I was someone with potential, and I was tired of being treated like trash. I took advantage of the opportunity and, with a firm voice, replied, "Victor, I understand that I have a lot to learn, but that doesn't mean that my ideas are any less valid. Everyone here has the right to be heard." The room fell silent again. I was surprised to see some colleagues nodding their heads, supporting my courage. Victor, however, didn't seem satisfied. He shot me a withering look before sitting down again, and I realized the battle was far from over. After the meeting, I retired to the kitchen, where I found Lisa. "You were incredible in there, Daniel. Don't let him get you down. You have enormous talent," she said encouragingly. But, as I thanked him, my mind couldn't stop thinking about Victor and how I could turn the situation around. The idea of infiltrating Victor's personal life began to take shape. He had many secrets, and I needed to discover one that could be used against him. After days of observation, I realized that he often received strange phone calls and that he often went on closed-door meetings. One day, while he was preparing for an event, I decided to take the chance. With excitement and nervousness pulsing through my veins, I headed to his office when I realized the room was empty. I started rummaging through the drawers, looking for any clue that could give me an advantage. It was then that I found a confidential document, barely hidden under working papers. My heart sank when I realized this was an analysis of a project that Victor had mismanaged. The numbers were alarming and pointed to a possible catastrophic failure that could ruin his career. "I can't believe he was so careless," I muttered to myself, holding the document in shaking hands. At that moment, the anger I felt throughout my journey at the company turned into a plan. I had the weapon I needed, but the question that echoed in my mind was, how far would I be willing to go to get revenge? Time seemed to fly by as I pondered my options. With the document in hand, adrenaline coursed through my body. It was time to decide if I really wanted to move forward with this. The idea of exposing Victor made me nervous, but the prospect of finally being heard and respected was tempting. I knew the next steps I took could change my life forever. My heart beat in my chest like a crazy drum. With the evidence in hand, a part of me wanted to retreat and forget everything, but the accumulated pain and daily humiliations I had endured pushed me forward. I felt adrenaline course through my veins as I decided it was time to act. "Enough," I whispered to myself, looking at the document that revealed Victor's incompetence. It was what I needed to expose the truth. That morning, I decided that I could no longer be a mere spectator of my own life. When I entered the office, the environment seemed even more oppressive than usual. The fluorescent lights buzzed, almost as if they were laughing at me. "Daniel, can you help me with this?" Lisa's voice brought me back to reality. Her smile was a ray of sunshine in the midst of the storm. "Of course, Lisa. What do you need?" I replied, trying to hide my nervousness. "Just a quick review of the code I'm preparing." "You always do well with that," she said with a twinkle in her eye. "I appreciate it, but today I need to do something more important," I murmured, thinking about Victor. The weight of the decision began to become palpable. I knew I had to act quickly before my courage evaporated. With renewed determination, I headed to my superior's office. The path seemed endless, each step heavier than the last. When I opened the door, my heart skipped a beat. "Hi Daniel. What do you need?" asked Eduardo, one of the team managers, looking at me curiously. I have something important to discuss." "It's about Victor," I managed to say, feeling the sweat running down my forehead. "Victor? What happened?" Eduardo frowned, instantly worried. "It's about his work. I discovered something that, well, he shouldn't be in the position he's in," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. but the words came out shaky. Eduardo gestured for me to sit down. "Speak out, Daniel. What do you know?" I took a deep breath and began to expose everything, from the humiliations that I and other interns had suffered, to the discovery of the document that showed Victor's grotesque mistake. He compromised an important project and I can't let this go unpunished. Eduardo remained silent, absorbing everything. "This is serious, Daniel. Can you prove this?" With a shaking hand, I handed him the document. "Here. That's all you need." "I hope it's of some use," I murmured, hoping he would see what I saw. "This is a serious accusation." "I'm going to call an emergency meeting," said Eduardo, with a serious expression. He stood up, and I felt a mix of fear and relief. Finally, the truth was about to be revealed. As I waited in the conference room, my stomach twisted. Time seemed to drag by, but finally, Victor entered with his usual arrogant air. He looked at me with disdain. "What do you want, Daniel? I don't have time for your nonsense." Eduardo took the floor, interrupting him. "Victor, we need to discuss something serious." The tone of his voice was firm, and that gave me a little more courage. "I don't have time for games." "What do you want?" Victor grew impatient, but I could see the nervousness beginning to creep into his posture. Daniel brought up some questions about his conduct at work and a mistake that could have serious consequences for the company, Eduardo said, looking intently at Victor. The air became tense. I felt my heart accelerate as Eduardo's words reverberated in the room. The expression on Victor's face changed from arrogance to incredulity. "This is ridiculous. There's nothing he can prove," he snapped, but I knew the truth was about to become undeniable. "Actually, I have proof," said Eduardo, handing the document to Victor. "And you will have to explain that." I saw the color drain from Victor's face as he flipped through the pages. This isn't what it seems," he stammered, trying to regain his composure. "You have a meeting to attend, Victor. And I suggest you take it seriously," Eduardo replied, and I realized that the change I had been waiting for was about to happen. My heart was pounding, and even with the adrenaline rushing, a feeling of relief began to set in. I had done what needed to be done, and from that moment on, my life could change forever. The meeting room was full. The air was tense, and the anticipation was palpable. I sat across from Victor, who was red in the face with anger and embarrassment. It was almost surreal to see him in that position, having humiliated me so many times. He tried to maintain his composure, but his voice was shaking as he spoke. "That's absurd," he exclaimed, trying to defend himself. "These allegations are unfounded. Daniel is just an intern with no experience." Those words, which used to hurt me, now sounded empty. I remembered every criticism, every sarcastic laugh he threw my way. "Victor, please," I said, trying to stay calm. "The evidence speaks for itself." I lifted the folder containing the documents I collected, my heart pounding in my chest. The room was silent, and all eyes were fixed on us. The team director, a middle-aged man with a stern expression, reviewed the papers I had submitted. "Victor, we can see here that there were not only oversights, but also a series of questionable decisions in your leadership. And as for the treatment that Daniel received, it is unacceptable." Victor clenched his teeth and leaned back in his chair, as if trying to absorb the gravity of the situation. "Are you believing an intern? He has no idea what he's talking about." "I know what I'm talking about," I replied, my voice firmer than I expected. "And I know I'm not the only one who has been treated unfairly. Other team members can attest to this as well." The director looked at the others present. "Would any of you like to speak out?" The silence dragged on, but finally, a colleague, Anna, raised her hand. "Victor, I've seen you belittling Daniel's work several times. He doesn't deserve this." Anna's words were like a blow to Victor's stomach. He was alone, there was no longer any way to escape. The meeting unfolded with questions and answers, and, at times, I wondered if I was really living it. It was like a movie where the protagonist finally stands up to the villain. After the appeal from each of those present, the director turned to Victor, who was visibly shaken. "Victor, I'm sorry, but we can no longer keep you at the company. Your dismissal is effective immediately." I felt a wave of relief mixed with euphoria. Victor was no longer in a position of power over me. He stood up, an expression of disbelief on his face. "You're going to regret this." He left the room, and I couldn't help but smile as I watched him leave. The atmosphere in the room instantly changed. People started applauding me, and I didn't know how to react. One of my colleagues, Carlos, came over and said, "Daniel, you were incredible." Finally, someone had the courage to stand up to Victor. "Thank you," I replied, feeling the warmth of gratitude. I just did what needed to be done. It was true, but the feeling of having regained a little power was indescribable. The director called me back to the table. Daniel, because of your courage and resilience, we are pleased to promote you to a junior role. You deserve this chance to showcase your potential." I could feel all the looks of approval from my colleagues. It was recognition I never thought I would receive. "Thank you. I won't disappoint you," I said, almost in disbelief at what was happening. As the applause echoed, I realized I had finally broken the cycle of humiliation. Victor couldn't get to me anymore, and I had a future ahead of me. However, the victory did not last long. A day later, I learned that Victor had tried to sabotage my work by spreading unfounded rumors about my competence for the new position. When I heard this, a chill ran down my spine. But then, I realized that the truth would always prevail. With the support of the team and the documents I had, I could face any challenge. Justice had been served, and now it was my time to shine.